Hello chess friends and welcome to your Najdorf Chess channel and welcome back to the TCEC Season 28 Super Final that you can follow now on the official and beautiful TCEC website. So we have now the battle between the most powerful chess engines in the world between Stockfish and LilaC0. In this Super Final they will play 100 games, and after 30 games that have been played so far, it's already, I would dare to say, a decisive result where Stockfish is having a +7 result. So Stockfish has gained so far already 7 points more than LilaC0. What's basically going on in this super final is that Stockfish is making draws out of this seemingly worse position in the beginning. So you know that the organizers are pre-arranging some openings where one engine has really, I would say, a bad position in the opening stage, but then tries to get a drawish outcome. And most of the time Stockfish gets its draws with the black pieces, but then wins the reverse games, while LilaC0 is winning also a couple of games, but of course then also Stockfish is winning the reverse game. So +7, I would dare to say it's already game over for LilaC0. So I sorted out now an amazing, spectacular game from the super final. It's a Najdorf Sicilian, really one of the sharpest Sicilians that we can see, with really beautiful tactical sequences. Also, what's worth to mention, with a beautiful opening novelty in this opening with the white pieces. So let's see now what happened with white. The fish opened with the move e4. We have now c5 by Lila, the Sicilian defense. Knight Qf3 d6, the modern variations, opening up the center with d4, c takes d, knight takes d, knight Qf6, attacking the pawn, knight to c3, and now from this point on, basically black is showing his cards. So he can play g6, the dragon Sicilian with e6, the shavening. There are also ideas that you can go into, I don't know, knight from b to d7, no more normal stuff. But here, after move a6, we have reached now the Najdorf Sicilian. We have bishop to g5, a normal line. We have now e6, building this shavening pawn structure, where black is hoping to get a breakthrough then later with the e5, or maybe with the move d5. Queen to f3, Stockfish continues the pressure, knight to d7, and now the standard idea of the Najdorf Sicilian, or of many Sicilians, when you're playing with the white pieces, queenside castling. So you see, white has already gained a nice development. White has already a beautiful piece activity. Black is relying simply in this type of position on his powerful central control, where these two pawns are restricting, of course, many squares in white's camp, in white's position. White cannot activate the pieces further on this side of the board, on black side of the board. So the restriction idea of this opening is so far good, but of course the downside for black is that black has a slightly cramped position. Black's pieces are not playing in such beautiful harmony like white pieces. We have now the move queen to a5, which is a provocative idea. Maybe if you're a beginner, you could fall for this, going maybe with knight to b3, attacking the queen, but of course then you lose the bishop. So queen to a5 was met by h4, but we're still in the pre-arranged opening, so it's not like these engines are playing this position like they want to. Still, the organizers prepared this move h4, and now the last move that was pre-arranged by the organizer was now the move bishop to e7. h6, I would say here would be maybe the standard idea for black, but even this line can be met with bishop to f6, knight to f6, and then g4, putting more pressure on the king side, which is still playable, I would say, for both sides. I see one game in the database, the outcome was a drawish result. So after bishop to e7, let's see now what Stockfish has prepared in this position. And now comes already a very important moment of this game. In chess history, a3, king to b1, g3, bishop to e2, queen to g3 has been played. So all of these moves are perfectly fine. All of these moves are, I would say, continuing the game for both sides. But Stockfish in this position found an amazing theoretical novelty with the ultra aggressive g4 here. G4, really great stuff. Also, what's worth to mention, LilaC0 also played this move. It's not like Stockfish made here really all of the theoretical novelties in this event. LilaC0 in the reverse game also played the move g4. The idea about this move g4 is actually to prevent black from castling kingside. G4 is already creating enormous pressure, and there is now this counterplay which LilaC0 played, which also Stockfish played in the game with knight to e5, and it seems so that something went wrong because white lost a pawn in the opening stage. But now comes really the main idea about this g4 move, that it's really restricting any possibility anymore for black to castle on the secure side on the king side. Because look at this, bishop to e2, continue the pressure against the knight. h5 is supporting further the knight on g4, but it's weakening already the structure. So you can imagine if what would have happened if you would now castle on this side of the board with such a weakened structure, with this open g file. Enormous pressure white could cause in black's position for sure. So here, after move h5, Stockfish continues with f3, kicks away the knight. You see now the g file is finally open, and now the follow-up is f4, again attacking the knight. There is now the threat of knight to e3. Stockfish blocks it with the rook to d3, and you know what happens when Stockfish plays the rook lift. I always mention that the rook lift is a signature move by Stockfish. When this rook is somehow coming into the game, when Stockfish is playing its games, then you know that this rook will be a special one. Not that this rook is only protecting the e3 square. It will probably shift over here on this side of the board, or if necessary on this side of the board, and will continue the pressure against black's position. What the cool part always about rook lifts is that it creates really madness all over the board, and probably most of the times you see this rook getting sacrificed somewhere, and I promise you in this game it will be always also a very specific piece in white's attack. So what should you do if you castle? I've analyzed the move castling because maybe you ask yourself the question, why should not black castle now? The position is fixed here, everything is glued together on this side of the board. There is no h3 or f3 that could kick away the knight from the g file. But the issue is bishop to g4 is already very nasty to handle for black, because you cannot take knight takes g4, the bishop is hanging. That's the issue. If you try here h takes g4, then rook to g1 continues the pressure here on the g file, and now after bishop to d7, maybe normal development, because knight b5 is not an option here because of knight to c6. That's now the issue, knight to c6, then knight takes e7. For instance, if you try bishop to d7, then bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, queen to g4, and even if you try maybe to create some breathing spaces for the king, then e5. The main idea about this move e5 would be then knight to e4, and you're getting destroyed. If you step back, of course, then you lose immediately. If you get your king here, then again you're getting simply destroyed by the heavy artillery, by the beautiful queens and rooks activity. So that's why for bishop to d3, rook to d3, bishop to d7 has been played by Leela, preparing queenside castling. And again, queenside castling seems of course like a logical idea, because now you're getting out of this mess, out of this attack, out of this enormous pressure that Stockfish has prepared on the g file. But even if you manage to castle queenside, there's still weaknesses in black's camp. Look at this, all of the dark squares will be probably attacked here by the bishop's activity, or maybe by the queen's activity on dark squares. And here Stockfish plays again a normal move, king to b1, improving the position of the king. Now comes queenside castling, and now bishop to f3, targeting immediately the b7 square. What should you do here? King to b8, tiny little improvement also by black. You have to now bring the king in security, but now e5. And you see, already a tricky position. Stockfish calculate everything in a good way. Now the knight is hanging, the pawn on b7 is hanging. Let's see options for black. Even if you try here d takes e5, which many of us would probably play, then d takes e5 and knight to e5, it's actually not so good because of bishop to f4. And you could maybe try knight to g4. Then look at this, white would simply continue the pressure against this pinned knight on e5. Bishop to f6, look at this, knight to b3, kicking away the queen, queen to g3. What should you do? You can maybe support it with g5, h6, g5, h4, and then queen to h3 or similar stuff is perfectly fine. But we can I think agree this is really not a good position. Bishop hanging, knight hanging. Even if you try, I don't know, something like bishop to g5 here, then we take, and again game over here for black. So d takes e5, that's the most important factor here to say. Is not possible for black because of this dark square problems that we have discussed also previously, as I mentioned, many weak squares already in black's camp. So that's why after e5, queen to c7. Lila protects now finally the dark squares, but now Stockfish continues the pressure with rook to e1. Notice also that e takes f6 here for white is not so good, because after g takes f6, black would equalize the game, would also grab then the piece, and nothing gained here anymore in this attack for Stockfish. So that's why Stockfish continues the pressure with rook to e1. Lila plays rook to e8. Again, d takes e5 would be risky, because after takes e5, you can maybe try knight to d5. Seems tempting again, but look at this. Knight to d5 is causing already some madness here. You have to take, then the bishop is lost, even if you try here knight to e5 again, then bishop to f4, the same problems. You try maybe bishop to d6, but then knight to f5. Look at this again. The dark square problems is are simply too much to handle here for black. Again, let's repeat that d takes e5 is simply not possible here for black, because I think many of us would play this move in human level. Many of us would think this is perfectly fine, but you see, Stockfish has prepared here already dirty trap. So after rook to e1, that's why rook to e8. Lila includes now a new piece into the defense, and now queen to g3. Stockfish simply supports finally the e5 square. We have now bishop to c8 and now rook from e to d1, creating enormous pressure again against the pawn on d6 here. And what should you do? If you tried knight to d5, this wasn't playing the game, but it's one of the suggested moves also by top engines. Then the problems bishop to e7 seems like black has already defended this position, but now comes a tricky idea with queen to g1. Again, I'm pointing out the dark square problems are too much to handle here. Look at this. If you try d takes e5 now comes the stunning knight to g5. You have to now take knight to g5. There is a checkmate threat here on a7. If you try to protect it, then the queen is coming here on f4 with queen to c7 check, and then rook to a3 and similar stuff. You have to play knight to c6, but then b4 would be the follow-up. This wasn't playing the game, but look how crazy already this position can become. If you try queen to b4, then queen takes b4, knight takes b4, and in this tactical sequence, what happens actually is that black is losing the exchange. White will of course create damage with this rook, so will simply go behind, and again it's simply game over here for even if you try, I don't know, something like queen to a6 after move b4. If you try to step back, then rook takes d8, rook takes, knight takes, and then queen to c7. Now finally the c file is cleared, and you get even checkmated here by the beautiful knight and queen's activity. So see, the issues, knight to d5 seems tempting because finally you're getting rid of this very unpleasant bishop, but the dark square problems, let's repeat again, are simply again too much to handle for black. So after rook from e to d1, that's why d5, and seems also like a logical idea that you're locking out now everything. Now the position is more solid for black, the position is somehow compact. Look at this d5 again. If you take, then the same thing happens that we have discussed earlier. G takes f6 would simply lead into a two equalish position. So that's why Stockfish continues now with queen to g1, again with the threat of moves like knight to b5, and that's why Lila played knight to d7. Good move, because after bishop to e7, rook to e7, now the whole concept with knight to b5 is actually not working, because you can now finally take, and finally the knight is protecting the queen, and black can compete on dark squares against this very great queen here on g1. So now after bishop to e7 and rook to e7, Stockfish found another brilliant move, I would say, and this move meets with the idea of positions where you have already reached maximum activity. What I mean about maximum activity is that all of your pieces already here on from white's perspective have gained, I would say, almost the best activity. There's simply no further improvement of your pieces, and when that happens, I've discussed it many times in my videos, when that happens, probably the best next move is the pawn move. And what pawn move should you play here? Stockfish found a beautiful move, b4, and this move is preventing, first of all, knight to c5, which would be, again, unpleasant to handle, but it's also preparing here to move b5, which would cause further damage. If you try here maybe something like queen to b6 to maybe attack this pawn, then there is a problem of bishop to g4. Look at this. After maybe queen to b4, you could maybe try to deliver an in-between check. Nothing spectacular actually happens. Now you can go for the pawn, for the bishop here, partly for the piece here, but now we can go with knight to c6, and after b takes c6, rook to b1. There is this beautiful tactic in which black is losing decisive material. Game over here for black. So look at this, queen to b6, bishop to g4. Maybe you can go with h takes g4. You don't have to play this move, queen to b4, but then king to a1 anyway. You try maybe f6, but now look at this. White's pieces are simply dominating. You can even go for this, but now we can take knight takes e5. Could be met with queen to b6 again. Dark square problems that we have discussed. Again, game over. Even if you try them, rook to f8, then b5. The position just plays itself. Look at this. Both of these knights will be activated. Simply too much pressure here to handle for black. My Stockfish engine evaluates this position as +2. The b file attack is simply devastating. The knights are dancing in front of black's king. This queen is very dangerous. Can be also included on this side of the board into the attack. So too much pressure. So I'm showing you this because queen to b6 seems like a logical idea, again, that you're competing first of all against the queen and you're creating a certain counterattack, but it's simply, again, not working. Look how complex this position is, how deep really Stockfish is calculating everything on both sides of the board. So that's why I remove b4. Lila tried rook from d to e8. Stockfish continues now with knight to a4, hopes to get the c5 square and hopes also to get the move b5. Knight to b6 here is not working. Seems tempting again that you're competing against this knight because of knight to b5, knight takes b6, and then this rook is coming into the game. You could get even checkmated. You have to, in this position, even sack the queen just in order to survive this attack. So after knight to a4, that's why f6. Lila cannot tolerate this space advantage anymore here by white. Stockfish continues now with the aggressive rook to c3, queen drops back, and now finally bishop to g4. Good positional trades of pieces, I would say, because the bishop is not doing so much here, and we have to mention this knight is also attacking the e5 square. So bishop to g4, h takes g4, and now rook to c6. This is, again, a beautiful move here by Stockfish, including now this rook in a spectacular way into the attack. As I mentioned also in the beginning of the video, when Stockfish plays a rook lift, probably something special will happen with this rook, and that's exactly what happens here. Rook to c6, but this move again meets now these ideas of maximum activity. Now there are no good pawn moves, so that's why we have to search for the most active square on opponent's side of the board, and that's exactly the move. Rook to c6. It cannot be taken, of course, because of knight to c6, the royal fork against the rook, against the queen and the king. So now comes, I would say, critical moment of the game. Many things can be played here by black. Even if you try, I don't know, f takes e5, then f takes e5. If you try knight to e5, then queen to g3, so winning the piece. You could maybe protect it, but now we simply take, and you cannot take it, of course, even if you try something like this, and then knight takes c6. Again, the royal fork, this rook cannot take because of the pin by the queen against the rook. So this is not working. So that's why for rook to c6, Lila tried knight to e5. Stockfish says that you should go with I don't know, instead of knight to e5, you should go maybe with king to a8 here. Then after rook to d6, queen to c7, queen to e3. Maybe you can play this position along, but again, the activity that white has here is too much. The knights are dancing. I think in this static position, in one moment, rook to d3 and rook to a3 could happen again. So in this position, maybe Stockfish could lift another rook. Again, too much pressure. I'm not seeing any good defensive ideas anymore here for black in any position. And for rook to c6, what Lila tried actually is to sacrifice the knight just in order to get the rook here. So Leela hopes to get 2 minor pieces for the rook, and Stockfish says, okay, I'll accept your challenge. So far you cannot take because of this pin, but now Stockfish gets attacked, and Stockfish gives up now the rook for the bishop, but has now 2 knights against the rook. But these knights are powerful. These knights are already very progressive. These knights are already very close to Black's king. This knight, we have to mention, comes with an attack already against the queen. So again, I would say White has the initiative. In many positions, a rook could battle against 2 knights, but this is tricky. This is really already a messy position for Black. So Leela tries queen to c8. Stockfish takes out now the pawn on g4, and Stockfish has at least created a pass pawn here on the h file, which is very important in the next couple of moves. We have now the move b6. The knight gets kicked away. Stockfish gets knight to d4, hopes to get this pawn, but now queen to d7. And now Stockfish could take knight to b6. The engines are saying is perfectly fine, but Stockfish plays first of all the check, allows here Leela c0 to regroup, but now b5. b5 is more important just to somehow create further weaknesses in front of Black's king. A takes b, knight to c3, we have now e5, and now finally this pawn is taken. Now the knight is again very active. The issue is now after d4, Stockfish has this counterattack with a4. You cannot take, of course, because of the tensions by the rook against the queen on the d file. We have now queen to c6, and now a beautiful move, knight to e4. Look how Stockfish improves the position of the knights in the tactical way. Obviously you cannot take. Let's see if you play this one, then again the royal fork. Knights are really tricky bastards in these types of positions. So after knight to e4, we have now rook to d7, and now queen to f3. And if you try something like rook to f8, then this move can be met with this idea, knight to d6. Again, if you step back, you lose simply the piece, you lose the queen on c6. If you try something like this, then you lose again the exchange. In this particular sequence, Stockfish would continue with an extra knight, so this is not working. That's why for queen to f3, Leela stepped back now finally from this potential attack by the queen, but also by the knights here. Steps back from the b7 square. Stockfish continues now with rook to f1, an attack against the pawn, and Leela protects, with the idea also to play the move f5. That's why queen to f5. Beautiful blockade here by Leela, not allowing this pawn storm, these 3 connected pawns, to roll. These are immobile pawns now. They cannot make progress further because Black is simply relying. If, for instance, you allow f5 in any of these lines, if you allow e4, if you allow, I don't know, e3, d3, and similar stuff, if these pawns are rolling, with the support of both of these rooks, it wouldn't be such a great game here for White. Queen to f5, very important move here by Stockfish. We have now king to a8. King to b2, we have rook to c8, an attack, and now Stockfish simply protects it. Queen to c3 is not possible because of the beautiful defense by both of these knights. Queen to c4, we have now king to c1. Now Leela is trying to get maybe a dangerous check, but Stockfish says it doesn't matter. Look at this, knight to d2. Even if you make one single check, then we step back and there's no good check anymore. You could maybe try another, but then we simply take, and even if you pick up this one, notice also that the rook is hanging on c8. Actually, queen takes c8 is even immediately a checkmate. So not only that Leela doesn't have any checks, Leela has to be careful also on the back ranks, because in any of these lines, if Stockfish manages somehow to deliver a back rank check, then it's actually a checkmate because of the knight. This knight could come into the game, so very tricky position again to handle for Leela. Queen to c6. Now Stockfish again improves the position of the king, and now knight to b3, hoping to get also somehow the a5 move and maybe get also this rook behind, including the rook again into the attack. Rook to g7, and now h5. The Stockfish is trying to stretch now Leela's defense, tries to deflect maybe this one of at least one of these rooks from the defense of the king, and somehow change the direction, maybe with the potential, as I mentioned, a5 move. So basically here Lila cannot defend both sides. This pawn is already very far advanced. Lila cannot push pawns, we have to say it, because Stockfish created this blockade. Very amazing position created here by Stockfish. We have now rook to h8, queen to h3, rook to h7, and now queen to f1. Even if you take here, then you're getting destroyed again on the back rank. That's not possible, so that's why rook to f7. Lila protects now the pawn on f6, queen to g1, and now rook to h7. Even if you try here rook to f8 to maybe hold this position, then the queen is actively coming into the game. And the issue is now, even if you try, I don't know, to compete, then we can play simply like this. I've just analyzed a little bit the position further. Look how crazy this position can become. Even if you go for the queen, in one moment we can even sack the queen. You have to now bring the queen in between, and again, a lost scenario here for Lila. So that's why for queen to g1, Lila is holding this position, tries to get rook to h7, rook to f7, and hopes maybe to get a drawish position. But Stockfish continues now with rook to g2, important move, threatening of course a dangerous check. Rook to c8, Lila protects it, and now rook to g8 anyway. Stockfish allows Lila to take, but look at this. After king to a3, Lila doesn't have any good checks. The knights are actually the best defenders of your king against the queen. Look at this, queen to c5 is not possible. And now at least Stockfish has created a position where Lila is forced to trade off further pieces. King to b8, Stockfish plays knight to d6, a very important move, forces now the trades of queens. The trades of the trades of rooks comes with a check. We have now king to a7, h6, great move. You cannot take, of course, because then the queen is coming here into the game. So that's why rook to d7. Lila has to protect now the 7th rank. Stockfish delivers a new check. Lila escapes, and now comes this idea that we have discussed. Again, the principle of maximum activity. When there's no further piece activity, no better piece activity, then probably the best next move is a5. Look at this, after b takes a5, now the queen is coming in a beautiful way into the game. Knight to a5 can be played later, but now Stockfish has cut off the 6th rank. King to c8, Lila is trying to escape. Knight to d6, we have now king to c7, knight to e8. Stockfish grabs now this very important pawn. Lila is hoping to get some kind of counter attack, but now new check, queen to f8. The issue is after king to c7, knight to d5, and wherever you go, actually it's a losing. Listen, even if you try king to d7, then you get the check. If you try something like this, then the rook is lost. Even if you try king to c6, then there is this problem of knight to a5. So the knight can always create very nasty forks against the king, or maybe against also the rook or the queen. So here after knight to d5, king to c6, now comes this idea. Lila simply lost on the c file, and now Stockfish grabs the sizing material, delivers a couple of checks, pushes the pawn further, promotes a new queen, allows here even new queen to be promoted by Lila. But now after queen to e5, it was a beautiful checkmate by this amazing 2 queens activity. So brutal attack again here by Stockfish in the Najdorf Sicilian with this G4 novelty. Amazing game, I would say. Could be really sort of a game where you have home preparation for you, maybe against the Najdorf Sicilian. Great novelties, great attacking ideas, great rook lifts, great sacrifices. Really one of the best chess games, I think, from the TCEC Season 28 Super Finals. Of between these two top engines. So okay, if you want to see some other beautiful chess games from this event, and also other beautiful chess games of the AI chess world, check out our Come the Chess Games Play by Computer series. Here's the link to the playlist, and if you like this content, hit the subscribe button. See you soon with some more videos, and what do we say in the end? Chess is the best, of course.